Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 6th Mama Charitable Foundation Visiting Professor in Buddhist Studies lecture series. Today is the second lecture of the series, and we are very happy and honored to have invited Professor Padmasiri da Silva again to share with us his wisdom and insight. Professor da Silva is the pioneer and leading scholar in the field of Buddhist counseling. He was the professor and head of Philosophy and Psychology Department of the University of Peradeniya in Sri Lanka back in the 1980s. He is also the author of many influential books in the field of Buddhist counseling, such as the book An Introduction of Buddhist Psychology and Counseling, which was first published in 1979. So back in the 70s, Professor da Silva has already started his research in this field, and with over 80 years of age now, he is still very actively involved in the research in Buddhist counseling. Today, he is going to deliver the lecture with the theme, Understanding Depression and the Lost Art of Sadness, Issues in Depression and Grief Counseling. So without further ado, please join me to give a big hand to warmly welcome Professor da Silva.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. Yes, really, walking through this campus, I was reminded of a little melody that I had composed, which I sing in the morning, and the singing birds, the beautiful seminary, that sort of thing. So this series of today's talks, at the end, I'll give you a little glimpse of what I call music therapy from my own composition. So it's a lovely morning, and but we are going to get into a rather difficult topic. Not a difficult topic. Now, what I discussed last time was basically a highly theoretical issue about the nature of emotions and the relationship of the body to the emotions, and so on. Today is going to be a very practical concern. It concerns everyone, it concerns me, and because it concerned me, I took to therapy. Not merely learning therapy, but also teaching. So this is a very practical thing. Now, among those who are present, I'm so happy that your campus has such a lot of fans of therapy and fans of Buddhist counseling. And I must congratulate the staff for organizing this session. And also all those who were with me, who came to pick me up and brought me here. Now, depression has many layers, many assets, and I have just given a very short outline of. Now, the first one I'm going to discuss about clinical depression. Very often people bring all depression under clinical depression. Exaggerations of normal effective depression, which is not depression. Then, of course, a very, very difficult thing, which I personally went through, my early experience through depression was grief, separation from the loved ones. If you read this book, Buddhist Introduction to Counselling, my life story is there. So that is why depression is so important. Next, we are going into what is called, lots of my clients had what is called pedestrian depression. It's not depression, but things like a broken motor vehicle, sudden health concerns, warning by a doctor who wants you to do some certain tests, challenges to permanent jobs, or a son failing an exam and so on. Now these are what are called pedestrian things, which if well handled, if badly handled, now in the case of jobs especially, I had a client who was drowning his job disappointment with alcohol. Now that's the last remedy that someone should show. Then we come to a new area of depression. Now after Freud, Eric Fromm developed what's called the Neo-Freudian tradition, where he said that depression has social aspects, social elements, which is very important. So social psychologists go to the wider meaning of depression in society. And today, that number is increasing. In fact, they use the term alienation. Eric Fromm used the term alienation. Estranged from one's own self at the center of living and energy. Continuous daily stress at work. Now see, in spite of all the time-consuming devices that people have, they always spend sleepless nights. Right? Stress at work. So the need for proper recreation, need for balance, how to correct the routine life. Now, all these are important aspects which that's not really depression, but it's around these lifestyles that depression might emerge. The last two has hardly been done by anyone in relation to depression. And in fact, I was at a conference where someone got up and said, "Can you tell me whether the Buddha had an answer to these two issues?" One is the depression that came during the financial crisis in America. People lost property, people lost houses, they just reduced to nullity. The second one is more difficult. Did the Buddha say anything about earthquakes, bushfires, floods, droughts, torpedoes? And in various countries, these things are happening. There's two beautiful sermons in the Middle sayings, Diga Nikaya and the Madhyama Nikaya, where Buddha gives a straight answer to this question. And that is one of my important contributions, so I'll come to that later. People are baffled by all this. Buddha has a theory. It's Dhammanyama, Chittanyama, Kammanyama. It's only when you go against this, the Buddha says, patterns, the four elements will revolt. Air, water, fire, all these things. They revolt, he said, people don't. So the Buddha has a very good analysis of these problems, which not merely cause depression among hundreds and hundreds of people in bundles, you see. So this is an important issue. And that depression is so different from the other forms of depression. So that's why I put this chart to see when you discuss depression what is important. And I'm of course going to spend a lot of time on depression proper, clinical depression, and grief counseling. And I will come to the others towards the end. Now among psychologists, depression is considered, along with mania and anxiety, as affective disorders. Certain forms of depression may be considered as pathological. That we have to accept. While others are considered as exaggerations of normal, effective responses. When you don't look after them, when you don't say about it, then, as Woolpott says, it turns into malignant sadness, because you have not done it depression for lots of reasons, and if you don't handle it, it becomes malignant sadness, which is a near ally of depression proper. So depression, which is an exaggeration of a normal response, when neglected, one may say, or dislocated, gets converted into malignant sadness, says Wolpert. Wolpert himself went through depression. He has written a beautiful book on Adjunct. So when you come to those days, the boundaries, you have to be very sure that you look after them. If not, it turns into something different. Fortunately, my story of depression is here. I have no time to discuss that. But at a certain point, I was in the clinic for 2 weeks, and I knew what a great thing to get out of it. And I had that courage, the conviction that there's a way out of it. So that's blossoming I had. And after that, I really, not merely did I study depression, it was going, though I had a PhD in philosophy, it was like going to school again. 3 years I studied counseling because I wanted to give a part of myself to others, and for 6 years with migrants, I did free counseling. I just gave it free. So you see, that is why, and most of them had job problems and depression, and I was able to convert them, change them. Also, there's a very good case of alcoholism. So 6 years of work, I have written a little book about those results, So you see, it's very important that, as someone said, the client and the therapist are on a long journey, and it's the same journey, because no client, no therapist are free from dukkha. So that's a very emotional background to my interest in therapy. There is also what is called pedestrian depression, which all of us are subject to temporary setbacks to health, accumulated bills, minor blockages to regular transport, child falling ill, examination, continuous failures of job interviews. Now that's the point where you need some really positive advice. And I had a client who had, after 10 years of work, been trained in England. Later, I got him to meet the employer, get a testimonial from him, and accept that he has a lot of anger, turn into a new field. He had some experience in journey. He became expert nurse, won a medal. You see, and even today, he's one of my friends. This is just one example, you see. So job problems need some solutions in the context. Because there are so many things that you can do when you lose a job, which is then setbacks in married life. Couple counseling is a special area in counseling. I have not really gone into it very much. Setbacks in married life that can be handled with patience, love, and humility. In my practice as a counselor, I help lots of people who had what I call pedestrian depression, and then kept them away from falling into depression. So there are delicate signposts in life which need to be handled with equanimity, upekha, patience, resilience, and compassion towards oneself. This is the Buddhist path to serenity. Sigmund Freud was one of my favorites. did my PhD on Buddhist and Freudian psychology at the University of Hawaii. And when I had for the interview, my professor said, you have to read 24 volumes. I found it not that difficult. Wonderful genius. He has been misunderstood due to his sex theories. But his article on the nature of narcissism, self-love, on the nature of what in Buddhism we call vibhava, the destructive urge. So there are lots of interesting things in Freud, but Freud said something nice. He wrote a beautiful paper called Melancholy, Melachli. How personalities turn sour and lose that sense of joy due to setbacks in life. His thesis is that periods of melancholy or sadness are a necessary part of life, dukkha, and could convert it into the dawn of a new kind of wisdom on the nature of life. Freud showed real profundity when he stated that the aim of psychoanalysis was to replace neurotic unhappiness by normal unhappiness. So that's a beautiful way of saying. Replace neurotic unhappiness by normal unhappiness. That is dukkha. Like the Buddha, Freud was transforming historical misery into common unhappiness. Now, depression and boredom. Whole cultures are often swayed by a near ally of depression, which Eric Fromm calls boredom. I read a very interesting presentation by a professor on boredom, where the audience said that was the most interesting talk that they have done. There was not even a second of boredom listening to this lecture on boredom. It's Eric Fromm, who really had a long period of correspondence with the German monk, famous German monk, Venerable Nyanaponika. And he, in fact, asked me to write an essay on Eric Fromm and Buddhism, which he published. So Eric Fromm says this boredom, or there's an economist called Tibor Skitowski. He wrote a beautiful book called The Joyless Economy. Or on the positive side, these are very important cultures. Certain cultures get completely sunk into boredom due to their working patterns, due to their lack of recreation, lack of enjoyment. And now Catherine Lutz won a very special prize to going into a study of a culture called the Ifaluk culture, where grief is shared by others. Grief doesn't turn you depression. That whole culture is like a shock absorber. Sri Lanka, many years back, we had a bit of it, but things have changed. But the Ifaluk culture was able to absorb the sadness of people. There was no depression. So this is a very interesting, that culture plays a very important part. So if you live around friends, people who can advise, so that is why a therapist is very important. The suffering of one person and the nurturing of others by natural. There is sadness rather than depression. Thus, cultural factors also play a role in the prevalence of depression. One of the very, very popular Western therapeutic systems which became popular by dealing with depression is what is called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, or we call it MBCT, initially developed by John Kabat-Zinn, a number of others. Now on the last in this program, there's a big seminar, large seminar. There I will speak on John Kabat-Singh's MBCT contributions to pain management. On depression, there is a lot of material, but I really don't have time to go into the contribution. MBCT has been groundbreaking for clinical depression. In my own practice and reflection and my personal experience of depression consequent on grief, I discerned that I developed a theory called mindfulness-based emotion-focused therapy. As I said, emotions became my hobby. Now this is following Leslie Greenberg, who developed FCT, but he didn't have until like mindfulness-based emotion-focused. I'm not going to discuss that a lot, but now I really want to come to grief counseling. Irving Yalom has written a beautiful book called The Gift of Therapy. Irving Yalom. And I sent this sentence to the organizers as a slogan. He says, the therapist and the client are fellow travelers. There is no therapist and no person immune to the tragedies of existence. True healers, Thomas Bien says, true healers do not stand outside the struggle of those they help. Healers know themselves as wounded, know their own sufferings as a part of the human condition. So that's very Buddhistic observation. The dominant psychiatric traditions have failed clearly to comprehend that sadness is a basic facet of the human predicament and not a clinical disorder. A beautiful book written by two anthropologists. One was also a doctor. Now they have really analyzed this what's called over-pathologizing depression. It is true that grief and mourning are often grave departures from routine life. But it is not a morbid condition. There is no need to hand over the mourner for medical treatment. In grief counseling, some of the richer facets of grief are seen. Grief being the contribution of the lost one and make one's love alive. It is also time for deep reflection and the meaning of life. That is another aspect of grief. It makes you look at the meaning of life. It makes you more serious. It is also time for deep reflection, the meaning of life, and commemorating the contributions of lost one. That's a wonderful thing that one can do. Following Irving Yalom's insight, it is because of my own personal story of grief and depression, which ultimately carved the way to become a professional therapist, that I understand both grief and depression. Extreme cases of depression are somewhat different from that which overtakes normal people. And in such a context, Paul Bigler says, over-pathologizing depression is to mishandle many people with quite legitimate sadness in the face of adversity. Thus we may agree with Freud that although grief involves a grave departure from the normal life, it never occurs to us as a morbid condition and hand the wound. All this is written in a very famous essay that I wrote called The Loss of Sadness. That loss of sadness, you get it in this book, that's whole chapter. I wrote it for a very famous, the pioneer emotion study, Robert Solomon, who died at the age of 65 at a place where he had gone to take the plane. So his wife edited this volume, and I wrote this the whole thing, the loss of sadness. So grief counseling is very important. My own approach in mindfulness-based emotion-focused therapy is not to reify depression as a thing, but to see it as an emotion constructed out of a number of components of perception, of situation, body sensations, feelings, thought patterns. I call this the combination approach to the construction of emotion. You can take an emotion and break it into its concept, its feelings, lot of things. In fact, I had really promised to prepare a text for this course on emotion studies, where I plan to deal with these various theories like the cognitive theory, the motivational theory. So really, when you go into depression and sadness, you can see them as a complete emotion with many sides. It's called the combinational approach to emotion studies. Paul Lekman, I will be discussing Paul Lekman next time when his wonderful work on Charles Darwin. After 100 years, he is the man who discussed Charles Darwin, who really found emotions on the face. Now, Paul Lekman says, if sadness dominates depression, we speak of retarded depression. If agony is more prominent, it is an agitated depression. People who are depressed not only feel helpless to change their life, but they feel hopeless. Not helpless, they feel hopeless. They do not believe it will even get better. In addition to sadness and agony, guilt and shame are strongly felt. If a person is this is a very important point, person is undergoing through depression. If someone wants to be a little funny and then, make some shameful remark, that will be like killing a person. So you have to treat people who are depressed, you have to respect them, you have to understand them, give them courage and so on. But if you try to start looking then you don't have any human qualities. They are worth, anger-directed depression is very bad. My own practice gradually took the form of mindfulness-based emotion therapy, which I will not discuss in detail now. There's little more work on boredom because Eric Fromm, and also, you had one of the this series talks, Alan Walsh. Now Alan Wallace. Alan Wallace has made a very interesting study of boredom as an attentional crisis, because boredom is very close to depression. Now, Goldstein, the very famous Buddhist meditation teacher, says, to realize that boredom does not come from the object of attention, but rather from the quality of attention, is truly a transforming insight. Fritz Perls, one of those who brought Gestalt therapy to America, said boredom is a lack of attention. So understanding this brings, and what does mindfulness practice do? Mindfulness practice is focused to the development of attention. If you have an ability to get intensely interested in something that is exhilarating and beautiful in life, there is no room for the infiltration of boredom. And Eric Fromm says, there are whole cultures where people cannot get excited in something, make life interesting. And why this boredom? Whatever the object, it is the subjective state of exhilaration that is within you. It may be music, it may be art, it may be gardening, it may be cooking or reading. In fact, art therapy is often used with people who have mild depression. Now, at the close of this lecture, I give a little glimpse of what is called music therapy. So you see, you can make your life beautiful. You can make it very whole. You can make it interesting. Eric Fromm wrote a very, very wonderful book called The Art of Listening, which was published after his death. Now there he shows how you can make life. So this is the other side of depression. How you can make your life interesting, exciting, get something. There are, when I was going to school, I was so enamored by gardening, flowers. I had all the colors of bougainvillea in my garden. So like that, there are lots of things that you can do. One needs to have values and goals that energizes life. And the experience of dear one that one has lost may be converted into an inspiration. That is what I have done. Most of these books they are written in the memory of various people who had a central part in my life. Only people who are capable of loving strongly, Tolstoy said, only people who are capable of loving strongly can suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counterfeit their grief and heals. Now, Alan Wallace has very interesting, what I just mentioned. He says boredom has many varieties and these belong to whole cultures. There's a kind of boredom which emerges out of the manic quality of life, which is time compression effect, increased stress at work, sleep deprivation, burnout, workaholism, that we call workaholism. I mean, you do a job to earn a living, You don't work to submerge your depression or something like that. So be careful of workaholism. I don't have it anyway. I mean, I'm interested in therapy, but all this makes life interesting. And attentional deficit is characterized by the inability to focus on a chosen object. The mind becomes withdrawn and disengaged. Attentional hyperactivity, says Wallace, the mind is extensively aroused, resulting in compulsive distraction and fragmentation, like the alcoholic or the sex addict. And attentional dysfunction when focus is being in afflictive ways, which is not conducive to our own. For instance, Alan Wallace and Shapiro Shona written a beautiful article called Mental Balance and Well-Being in the American Psychologies. And there's another very famous man who experimented with athletes, musicians, rugby players, workers, all types of people, and hill climbers. Now he says, who is a Mihaly, his name is very difficult to pronounce. I just call him Mihaly. His name is very, very difficult to pronounce. Sounds like Sukasenti Mihaly, who is an expert on what is called the flow experience. Flow experiences. Now I used to do long distance running those days, my younger days. When you practice it, when you really come to this thing, it's not that you are winning something, but there's a tremendous sense of beauty. A lot of musicians have this. Lot of musicians have this, and so that is called FLOW, the flow experience. In other words, mindful awareness of grief, you can move closer to people in your life who matter most and change habits of ideas. Full awareness, especially in grief, of your patterns of feelings and behavior from living with misery. So one can channel the momentum of grief into a journey of awakening. That is to come back to grief. There's one very interesting point which is found in a book called The Lost Art of Compassion. That is, today, lots of psychologists are focusing on pathology rather than positive human qualities. And Martin Seligman, the former president of the American Psychological Society, said the exclusive focus on pathology, that is too much of talk on depression and so on, has dominated so much of our disease. So that is why you should center your interest towards compassion. There are a lot of positive emotions that we can develop. Latner says that according to this disease model, we try to repair damage rather than aim at something positive. Catherine Lutz, the anthropologist to whom I referred, again shows that in a culture there can be very positive emotions and positive values. The next, before I come to my second part of the talk, I just want to mention, I mean, it's a story that you know. I have written on depression and children, the story of Kisa Gautami and the mustard seed. Now you probably know this story, not sure how many of. Well, there's a kind of a dramatological model for Buddhist reflections on the theme of death and grief, often presented to children in the Sunday school, to get them to understand Buddhist reflections on grief. Kisa Gautami was completely struck by tragedy. When she lost the infant child, and she went all over the village, get some medicine to bring back child back to life. As her mission failed, a person suggested that she should meet the Buddha, that he can help her. Amidst a large crowd to meeting the Buddha, who first got people to arrange their disarrayed dress, with compassion, the Buddha listened to her and said, I will help you if you can bring a mustard seed from a house that has not lost anyone. The Buddha gave her a task to complete. By the time she came back to the Buddha without a mustard seed, where every house had lost a mother or father or something, a sense of realism had dawned her already. There was a profound process of healing, and she was on the path to liberation. Martha Nussbaum, a celebrated philosopher, says these children's stories are very important. She says, children should understand the meaning of tragedy. And education in common human weakness and vulnerability should be a profound part of the education of children. Children should learn to be tragic spectators and understand its subtlety and responsiveness, the predicament to which they can enact it in a play. They can enact the story of Kisa Gautami. I have seen this done very beautifully in one of the Buddhist societies in Melbourne, the Kisa Gautami and the Mustard Seed. Through stories and drama, they should learn to decode the suffering of others, and thus decoding should deliberately lead them into both life and power, including the life of distant humans. I think now I get to the more difficult I said there are two sections which I would like to add that I hadn't really originally prepared, but I thought they're extremely important. First, we will take this financial crisis in US. This is a paper that I presented at the East-West Conference, the University of Hawaii, just on the brink of the financial crisis. Because the subject of controversial, they didn't publish the paper. But I'll tell you what I have written. You know, this financial crisis, the deregulation of the banking, and people subject to gambling mania, I have a little model which is called the Sandcastle Theory. Sandcastle Theory. A little boy is making a beautiful sandcastle. Up to this place is nice. Little more. He's saying that, a little more that, a little more that. Now that knows that this is a dangerous road. Then at some point, the whole thing collapses. All these business things, they were like, and they knew that the whole problem is they had the inkling that they are going to fail. So the Sandcastle Theory, that's another Sri Lankan story called The Monkey and the Banana, which again captures what is the story about the monkey and the banana? That is, you have a box into which you put a banana, and there's a little hole that the monkey can put the hand. Monkey can put the hand, but the monkey can't take the hand out. So the tremendous amount of suffering. But if the monkey has some intelligence, if you take the hand out, all the suffering is gone. Now this terrible gambling mania is like the case of if they keep out of all this indebtedness and all this and just manage what they can, there's no problem. So you see, these are the two stories, I used Tibor Skitaski's beautiful book, The Joyless Economy. The Joyless Economy. Of course, I know that Hong Kong is a rich country, but I think you have very balanced people here. So, anyway, I mean, this happened in America. This happened in America, the whole financial crisis. And so that is the answer. That is that I have written more on it, but that is basically the point. Then there's a very interesting book which came called What Money Can't Buy. What Money Cannot Buy, where he calls it market triumphalism. Everything is marketed. If you are interested in seeing a football match and you have to spend about 10 hours in the queue, you pay a man, buy the ticket from him. You understand? So you see, even going to a doctor, they might do that. This market triumphalism is also another in this whole. It's a crisis in morals. In fact, this book, What Money Can't Buy, also captured the same thing. Now come to the last topic. Earthquakes, bushfires, floods, droughts, torpedoes and all that sort of thing. What I have done is, in this book, Psychology of Buddhism in Conflicts, I have used a new model called the Dialectical Model to understand social phenomena, right? Not the objective analytical model. So that is, in fact, the publishers has a note saying that the first time a beautiful dialectical model has been understood. So now I will give you a glimpse of the dialectical model. It really comes on a study of what is called the Palasa Jataka by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Wonderful analysis. Now in the Palasa Jataka, a bird, give me a little time. Yes. Now, before I come to the Palasa Jataka, I will tell you a nice story about Mullah Nasruddin. Now, Mullah Nasruddin was one day looking at a bayside powerful lamp, and a man who is passing, Venerable Mullah, what are you searching? He said, I am searching for my keys. So where did you put the keys? My keys are in the room. Then he said, then why are you looking for your keys under this street lamp? Now, a lot of social scientists are like that. They are searching for the roots in the wrong place. Right? So when you go into this environment thing, very often you will find that people are really looking at the wrong place. Now, this is the analysis of the Palasa Jataka. I am indebted to Bhikkhu Bodhi. You know Bhikkhu Bodhi, the celebrated translator of so many all these Vikara literature. I sent him a copy also. Now, this is the story. This is called the two horns of a dilemma, and it's from the Palasa Jataka. My thesis is that we need to look at contradictions and paradoxes for illumination can be discerned from the story of the Palasa Jataka. The story of the golden goose, eloquently presented by Bhikkhu Bodhi. A bird that has eaten the fruit of a banyan tree voids its excrements on the trunk of a Judas tree. So what happens? The banyan seeds grow, and the banyan tree grows and destroys the Judas tree. The golden goose tells the tree deity, be careful, this Judas tree is going to be destroyed by the banyan tree. Do not allow the banyan tree to grow. As every tree on which the banyan tree springs, destroyed by its growth. The banyan tree, wrapping around the Judas tree, consumed the share of soil, water, and nutriment. As time went by, all happened as the golden goose foretold. The banyan shoot sent down roots which wrapped round the trunk of its host and consumed its share of soil and water. The banyan grew bigger and stronger until it split with it. Now, Bhikkhu Bodhi says this is a graphic parable for the present day crisis of global warming and typifies the kind of dialectic in the continuous zones of economics, ecology, and human. There's a conflict between. Now, if you want to develop The environment, the banyan tree represents the use of carbon-based fuels. In Australia, there's a big controversy on this, carbon-based fuels, whose emission of carbon dioxide is invisible. Small quantities, apparently harmless, and such use of fossil menaces civilizations and depend on. There's a dilemma here. Placing restrictions on carbon emissions means limiting production. People are losing jobs. Or if not, the environment suffers. So you see, this because of this dialectical, these conflicts, economics, ecology. In fact, when I was in Singapore, I did a program, after I left the university, I did a program called Environment, Ethics and Education. Now, in fact, this won the Green Leaf nominated for the Green Leaf Award. Now, I take all these conflicting factors. That is why this environment problem is a difficult problem. On the one hand, if we deal with fossil fuels, then people lose jobs. People lose jobs, then something happens. So these are called the dialectical factors, and Bhikkhu Bodhi has. Now there's one, yes, I want to continue this. I have a whole section on the mining industry. That article was written by my granddaughter, who just entered the medical college. Wonderful article on the mining industry. She's Ishka. I have published it, on the mining industry. So you should try to, even if you can't buy this is available online. Certain sections you can read it. Book is very expensive, but this is my first hand at social studies. Now we come to the last one. What about earthquakes, bushfires, floods and droughts? Now you know, a very insightful approach to understand multidimensional crisis is to understand what the Buddha described as the lawful nature of things, Dhamma Niyama. If you violate Dhamma Niyama, problems. A Buddhist diagnosis of moral degradation in relation to the environment, crisis of war, conflict and violence is understood in terms of the lawful nature, Dhamma Niyama. Then the Chitta Niyama. That financial crisis is due to Chitta Niyama. The greed is all that has got running round and round the mark. So Chitta Niyama, the greed dominated mind. So the Buddha is saying, he's looking at this. Karma Niyama. Karma itself is a multidimensional concept, but you can say that your actions have consequences. Right? If you are greedy and start selling a property and so on, ultimately, it's just nothing. So, Dhamma Niyama, Chitta Niyama, and Karma Niyama. This is found in a very famous, if anyone asks you, did the Buddha say anything about earthquakes and torpedoes? You can ask him to read the Chakkavatta Sihanada Sutra, War, Wickedness and Wealth. Now this sutra, he says more. 26 centuries ago, Buddha described the collapse of the moral order in society. You know what he said? Since folk are ablaze with unlawful lust, overwhelmed by depraved longings, obsessed with wrong doctrines, on such as these, the sky does not rain steadily. It is hard to get a meal. The crops are affected with mildew and grown to mere shrubs. Accordingly, many come to buy the end. That Brahmin is the reason why things are so. This is in the Malignant sayings. The Buddha says that there may come a time if the moral order breaks down, when the four elements air, earth, fire, and water become unruly. We are experiencing today with tornadoes, earthquakes, bushfires, tsunami, and floods. 30 decades ago, Fridtjof Capra, the famous scientist, said, "This crisis is unprecedented in human history. All this indicates the lawful nature of things." So you see, that's a beautiful analysis. So for those people who ask me, what did the Buddha say about earthquakes? Here's a wonderful answer. And one of my friends who knew Venerable Ananda Maitri, who's probably highly advanced on the road to somewhere. Now, he has said, told my friend, Buddha had predicted that if things go this way, this way, this way, this way. So you see, Dhamma Niyama, Chitta Niyama, and Kamma Niyama. So that is the answer. Of course, that is not the only answer. You have to find ways of improving the environment. You should see that greedy politicians and greedy people don't exploit human energy, so that you have a balanced life. You have a very sane economy and that sort of thing. So really, but these are difficult because in my own, from where I come, not Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka is again something very different. But now in Australia, they neglected the environment. They neglected the environment very, very badly, very badly. And in fact, in the order of points, Australia has come to the bottom. So you see, these are all the tremendous amount of qualified people, tremendous amount of people who are written on these things. But so this is really the issue about climate. So it's not just climatology. Climatology by itself can't solve. There has to be a human sense about values. So that is at least my theory, that in this, the dialectical patterns are giving up. It was a term which earlier Hegel used, then Marx used it, but I am using the dialectical in a very way. So I have almost come to the end of my presentation. Yes. Okay, then we'll leave time for questions.
So, thank you very much for Professor Da Silva's inspiring lecture. So, session is open to the floor now. If you have questions, please write down on the paper given to you. Okay, I have 2 questions here now. Okay, in Buddhism, we are composed of 5 aggregates. Do you think rupa has role in contributing affective disorder?
In Buddhism, we are composed of 5 aggregates. Do you think Rupa has a role in contributing to affective disorder? Yeah, this is a little abstract, but we'll try to see out. That is, in fact, Freud's paper on narcissism has an answer to this question about Rupa. Now, in his essay on narcissism refers to a person called Narcissus. Narcissus who's looking at his own reflection in water. He gets so thoroughly, I'm beautiful, and so on, and ultimately he couldn't find a girl. So this sorrow ultimately took his life, he died. This is the story. So Freud said that there's a thing called narcissism. So narcissism of Rupa, of course, in fashionable countries like Australia and wherever it is, Rupa is important. I mean, how you look. Only thing is, where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? I'm not speaking of the person who is doing a meditation on the evanescence of things and so on, but in normal life, one has to be balanced about one's Rupa in the sense of one's physicality. Nama Rupa or Nama Rupa. Rupa means physicality. But it can also mean other things. It depends what you really try to convey by saying about Rupa. If it's only a physical appearance and so on, it is one that you can have. But of course, if you are a hermit and if you really take the Buddhist path, then you will be very critical of Rupa because anicca, it's things which change. So I think it depends on your lifestyle and what you want to do. And Rupa, that's about what I can say about Rupa. So that people who are intoxicated with or people who are very disappointed with how they look and so on. So that those things play a part, I think. Ultimately, Rupa is something very critical because of anicca, it's a change. So if you understand that it's not something that belongs to you, anatta, anicca is something that is changing, and it can bring suffering, So it's natural that as you grow old, you have to reconcile yourself to various limitations and so on. So that's about that I can say. It's a very abstract question, but I hope.
Okay, the next question. If I want to study Buddhist psychology, do I need to read all the suttas said by the Buddha?
If I were to study Buddhist psychology, do I need to read all the suttas? Now, if you are interested in Buddhist psychology, you may study some of the very good, I think, mid-length sayings, as the Madhyama Nikaya, Diga Nikaya, there are those two especially. If you study them well, Diga Nikaya and Madhyama Nikaya, those others, of course, it depends on your specialty. But if you know your Madhyama Nikaya and Diga Nikaya, you can go, but you don't, in my case, I didn't study Abhidhamma. I've studied, but I didn't. So if you don't go into Abhidhamma, the Sutra Pitaka, those, so study, only thing is not the what to read, but how you study. That's the important thing. 2 or 3, in the way I did the Padasa Jataka, like that, you have to get really into it, study it. So best thing to have a good text with a good teacher and go from cover to cover and then understand everything detail. Other thing was do indexing. Buddhist psychology was field. Now I was interested in the unconscious in Freud. So I hunted the word anusaya, and wherever the anusaya is found, then so you have to read, you have to do indexing, and you can't do all Buddhist psychology, but you can get interested in something. It also depends on whether you are a student or whether you are a scholar or something like that. So also you can read a guide. Now, of course, I have this book. Now, if you go through this, you can see how I have used Buddhist texts. So that's I think a very good way of starting. Also, you must get used to reading. You see. Now, I'll tell you a beautiful book to read. Thought and the Thinker by Mark Epstein. My teacher, Venerable Guru, from Sri Lanka for 8 years, Venerable Dhammajiva's favorite book is Thought and the Thinker by Mark Epstein. Beautiful books. Now those books, immediately you don't find the insight in Buddhism, but when they expand, when you go to Buddhism, you look for certain things. Now I changed my definition of unconscious to subliminal. Anusaya subliminal means it's not deeply buried, it's very close to the consciousness. Anytime it's, so that is the meaning of subliminal. Patiga anusaya, anger. Raga anusaya, lust. Mana anusaya is very difficult, conceit, which comes at a later stage. So like that, I specialized on these psychological factors which are important for my study. You can't study everything if you are going to do a thesis. And then I think a good model is you can read something like this and see how I have worked on the. If you are a good student of Pali, I am not an expert on Pali. In fact, Professor Somaratha has helped me quite a lot for purifying some of these things. So if you are a good student of Pali, that's definitely a very big advantage. If you are interested in Abhidhamma, I can't advise you. That's a separate thing. But my area is mostly Sutra. Okay.
Okay. Is emotion generally good or bad to us?
Yes, I promised to do a little music therapy. I will do it when I complete, when I finish. Is emotion generally good or bad to us? Certain emotions are bad in the sense that akusala, right? Certain emotions are good, that is kusala, right? Compassion is 100% kusala, something very good. Envy and jealousy. If you read this book on Buddhism and humor, and my last lecture on anger, don't have to go. So that's how anger is one of the most insidious emotions. It comes up even when you practice sila as a nivarana. So it's there, anger. So definitely there are good and bad emotions. And we use the term kusala and akusala. The good and bad is a very, it's an English word. So then what are the other? Mana, conceit is a very difficult. In fact, I used to say sometimes a little bit of conceit is necessary. Probably up to a point. So that is the emotion that the monk says last, conceit. Mana. So mana is also there as answer, subliminal. Raga, lust, as answer. Those, or patiga, it's called patiga. Patiga answer, anger. So those are really the bad emotions. Some emotions are very neutral. So you can divide them into kusala and akusala. And now depression is not a clear emotion, it's constructed. But depression, certain forms of depression may not be that bad, it may be that you are sensitive to something. But then if you overdo it, then it becomes a problem. So I hope, is sadness a good emotion? Now that is the problem of grief, right? Because if you overdo sadness, then you get compassion and sadness, they are very different. What are the other emotions? Guilt. You know, I had a very interesting, that's how I got interested in emotion. The East West Center had a project with 20 people to collect emotion words from different cultures. And I had to collect the Sinhala ones, there's another lady who collected the Tamil ones, and I found that there was no word for guilt in Sinhalese at the time. Though now we have the experience of guilt. They might say Pagvargati or something like that. So really, the guilt is more the culture in which Sigmund Freud wrote. So guilt is very, very destructive. Guilt is, though there might be. Remorse is one of the worst things that the Buddha said. Remorse. Remorse is to do something and repent. There can be good kind of remorse. There can be bad kind of remorse. So I have just given you a few examples. So it's an interesting study to someone. If you are going to do Buddhist psychology, that's a nice question to answer. Emotions, good and bad, right? Already the title for a thesis, right? But you have to have more this thing, right? Any other questions?
Okay, the next one. CBT considered as one of the effective therapy to deal with depression, but CBT also viewed as cold and mechanical procedures. What is your view that Buddha's teaching can be blended in CBT that make it more approachable?
CBT considered as one of the effective therapies related depression, but CBT also viewed as cold and mechanical procedure. What is your view that Buddhist teaching can be blended in? This question is really MBCT, mindfulness-based mindfulness-based therapy. Body. But CBT also viewed as cold and mechanical procedure. I think it depends on how it is used. Now, Mark Williams and John Kabat-Zinn, they were experts in this, and they have been very effective. They've had good results. But there have been critics. The problem is this. when you get some of the beautiful ideas in Buddhism, but without some kind of base, because mindfulness-based therapy is good. It has human service to help people, but sometimes some people might find it very mechanical. So it's not a general thing. I thought mindfulness-based emotion-focused therapy has no liveliness in it, has no, so that I agree to some parts, but I think that when I do the talk for the final the seminar, I will be talking about mindfulness-based management, and now, yet I think MBCT is a help people. It can be done in a Buddhist up to a point, but I think there have been critics. There have been critics because of the Buddhist component. And one problem with that is issue about liberation orientation. Now, liberation orientation, and so that up to a point, they leave certain issues. But I wouldn't say that it is mechanical. No, there is avoidance theory. There are so many new theories which have come, and most difficult therapy is dialectical behavior therapy, on which I have written. So that is why you can't pass one judgment. It might help some people, it may not help others. But the fact that it has done quite a lot of good is because they have taken the idea, mindfulness, and some of the core beliefs and those things are not taken, So because of that, people are critical. But I will say that it has done a lot of service, but it has its limitations also.
Okay, the next one. How you would look at Bao repentances in Chinese is Bai Cham, as being the same or different from rumination, especially if one is already suffering from retarded depression.
How you would look at these Chinese words, bold repentances, as being the same or different from rumination? Once already, but I can't understand this. How would you look at Chinese words?
Chinese verse is, I just wanted to check out, this is the Chinese verse. Yeah, you may ignore this.
As being the same, as different from rumination. I can explain the term rumination, but I'm not sure of the Chinese version. Now, rumination is, we'll say, you study hard, and then in your class there's a lot of competition, and you go for the exam and you get just a pass grade, and the other chap who was less brilliant has got a B, right? Or an A, right? Now, if you go on thinking, what the heck is this, all this studies, all this, something wrong with the teacher, something like that, that is rumination. That won't help. But if you think, maybe I have not done very well, I must. So rumination is going over and over and over and over the same damn thing. Now, Chinese word might be beautiful, but how do you pronounce the Chinese word? Bo repentance.
Bo repentance, so it's a ritual kind of
Bo
repenting what you
repentance.
have done wrong.
What does the term bo mean?
Bow, it's like a ritual, say bowing to the Buddha and you repent what you have done wrong. Yeah, it's a ritual. Yeah, it's a very common ritual in Chinese.
Yeah. Anyway, the rumination really means that. This is not about the bow and the arrow, no? This is not about the bow and the arrow? No. That's a different thing. Anyway, that's what I can say about rumination, but I'm not sure about this.
Okay, maybe the next one then. How to sustain equanimity between mania and depression?
How to maintain equanimity between mania and depression. How to maintain equanimity between mania and depression. Thing is this, both mania and depression, they are bad. So, you don't try to maintain equanimity between the two. You can maintain equanimity between mild depression and being a maniac or something, but really you can't maintain equanimity between mania and depression. Manic depressive, you get a called manic depressive also. So I don't think you can get balance.
There are times people put much expectation on the results of things. The youths want to buy housing, etc. How to educate young people to deal with the expectation, as these days young people learn to be pragmatic than the times talking more about dreams and peace to end the world war among nations and making the world sustainable, tolerance to one's suffering.
There are times people put much expectation on the result of things. The youth went to buy housing, etc. How to educate young people to feel with the expectations, and these days young people learn to be pragmatic than the times talking more about dreams and making the world sustainable, learn to end the world. These are times people put much expectations on these sorts of things. The youths went to buy housing, etc., and that sort of thing. How to educate young people to feel with the expectation? I think it's a very good idea to be pragmatic. Pragmatism is a philosophy where now that thing where you got a bad grade and go on talking about. Now a pragmatic person will try to understand the context and do what is needful. He doesn't want to be this or that, but what he can. The most happy people are whose expectations at a certain level, something which you can reach. So this is very important. Everyone can't be like Queen Elizabeth or something like that. I mean, you can't. You have a certain, so that one of the important things is this. It is not merely being pragmatic, but trying to do whatever you enjoy. I know several students who have hardly any mathematical ability, but go on doing this and that and IT, all kinds of things, and they say, I can't study this, Try to get into something. Of course, it must have prospects, it must help you to earn a living, and so on. But there are so many things with which you can earn a living, Now I am, while I'll be giving a little bit of music therapy. Now there are musicians who have really enjoyed their whole life because they're doing something interesting. But if you get too ambitious, if you start comparing your music with someone else and doing this and that, so the contentment, that is the Buddhist idea. The contentment is important, but contentment should not obstruct, striving. There are people who have through striving, through ambitions are not bad. Ambitions are not bad so long as you. But the most important thing is the shortest cut that I can give is do something that you enjoy. Now I was, at the time that I went to the university, my father had 25 years of legal practice. But I didn't like to study legal documents. So when I took to philosophy, he was worried, you see. Very late in life, he said, son, you have found the ideal exercise to do. And of course, so it's like that, you see. Because I did and when I got to therapy, I found philosophy also becoming a little drab, because the kind of philosophy that is done in Monash, you see. I mean, they will spend 2 hours with wine and biscuits discussing the nature of color. Nature of color. What's the point? So you see, I really got fed up in this kind of philosophy. That's how I got into therapy. So the important thing is, whatever you study, it should have some point. It should be engaging. It should be engaging, must find it interesting. There are people, I know among musicians, there are lots of people who enjoy life, but that they later take to alcohol and all kinds of things, and they wreck their lives. So you have to have sanity, balance, contentment, pragmatism. Sanity, balance, contentment, and pragmatism. This is very important for young people. In fact, some therapists should write a book on this area. Now, I am planning to do a little booklet on my own experiences in life, from time to time. In fact, I was reading a book on martial arts, Aikido, from your own library, which I found it interesting, how you can become very centered, So that's a very, very interesting question that, out of all the questions that I've given, this is one of the most important things, how to make your life enjoyable, how to make it gratifying. Now at this age, 85 years, I can look back and say, it doesn't matter though I differed from my father. And later, of course, he was more than happy. He was more than happy. And my children also, it's the same thing. They did and they do whatever they like and they enjoy life. But a job and economic backing is absolutely necessary. You can't just live on mid-air. Put some thoughts onto that, but don't let that be the driving force where, like the financial crisis people, you go on building. Okay, any more questions?
Okay, the next one. Excuse me for a personal question. My only elder brother is a pathological control freak. He would disallow everything my father, mother, and I buy if it is not in his approved list. One time he threw away a cough syrup my father bought for his own cough. Sadly, my father passed away on October the 4th this year. My question is, how can I help my mother with the grief of the loss of a husband and lack of freedom living with brother? The second question is there a way I can let my pathological brother to change or even receive counseling? Thank you.
Yes, before I read this, I want to say that after reading this question, I felt that there is room for writing something on this. You know, lifestyles for young people. Someone among your crowd, among your teachers should really, it's a background of therapy. But now to come to this question. Excuse me for a personal question. My only elder brother is a pathological control freak. He would disallow everything my father, man, no, I buy if it is not in his Buddhist. One time he threw away a cough syrup my father brought for his own cough. Sadly, my father passed away. So my question is, how can I help my mom with the grief of the loss of her husband and lack of freedom living with brother? Is there a way I can get my pathological thing? This is a difficult question, but there are two panaceas, or two kinds of medicine. One for the brother and one for the mother. Right? With the brother, it's anger. I talked so much about anger last time. So if you study that, I think you should be able to find some way of, I think, compassion, kindness, resilience. Those are very powerful things you should be able to. Mother is different, of course. Mother's grief is different. You should do, now for instance, in our tradition Buddhist, we have the giving alms to monks, doing things of that sort of thing, or giving to charity, or even putting up a little library or something, depending on your country. So a lot of things can be done. And what I said about grief is you have to sort of, it's difficult to say unless you talk to the person, and so it's very difficult to do therapy, but what I can say is, for the brother, the anger is most important, and once you get that done, then I think the mother really needs grief counseling. You might take her even to a therapist, who is very good on grief counseling. The brother, there is no other panacea, no other issue. You have to deal with the anger. Right? Yes, that's, of course, if I know the people, it's easy, but it's rather, yes. Any more?
This friend is asking something in the script that you prepared, Professor. In page 12 of script point 3, when emotions such as sadness, fear, shame, and powerlessness overwhelm people, there is a need to help people regulate their emotions by getting them some distance from them. Is that means we need to avoid that person?
Page 12 of script point 3, when emotions such as sadness, fear, shame, powerlessness overwhelm people, there's a need to help people to regulate their emotions by getting some distance from them. If that means we need to avoid the person? This is a good question. In fact, it has reference to this what I have said. When emotions such as sadness, fear, shame, and powerlessness overwhelm people, there's a need to help people to regulate the emotion by getting them some distance from them. Any attempt to regulate emotion by preventing themselves from feeling the disturbing emotion, withdrawing, avoiding, using distraction, they are all counterproductive. it's a long, but I will try to be short as possible. Because answer to this question is highly contextualized depending on the person and the context. But basically, you know the way that Kisa Gautami, through the mustard seed, saw the message of dukkha. So like that, there has to be some kind of transforming power. Keeping a distance means looking at it. Now, if you go on looking at your anger and understanding it, that sort of thing, then it's like studying the nature of anger. So all these emotions, there was a PhD thesis done on this subject, that is why I refer to this emotional regulation. Sadness, fear, shame, powerlessness. So we don't really avoid, in fact, we meet them, we recognize it, we really understand. It can be tremendous education. See, emotion-focused therapy, this is one of the things that they do. They try to understand that emotion, see its, now for instance, I couldn't bring the neuroscience into this picture today. Now, the problem is, neuroscientists have found that certain emotions sometimes, they take, in fact it's called the amygdala. Now I'll give you this example. A man is crossing a forest track in the evening. He stumbles a bundle of twigs and then he tries to run away, thinking that it's a rattlesnake. Joseph Ledoux gives this example. Now they are the amygdala. So very often what really happens is just without your knowledge, because of your nervous system, the amygdala is the seat of the right excitement, and non-amygdala, resilience, is the seat of the left section of brain. So the important thing is there is a lot of these subliminal things. So we have to really deal with whether it is fear or sadness or whatever it is. You have to look at them and understand, knowing that they play a big role. So that is where mindfulness comes. That is the role of mindfulness. Now, when we say mindfulness, what we normally do is mindfulness in and out, the breath. After doing it in the breath, you can look at the body and you can extend this. In fact, mindful emotions is the first chapter in this book. Venerable Dhammajiva had asked for it and I sent it. He's going to USA and Canada. He wants to use that chapter. Now, mindful emotions. So that is the answer to this question. Just saying the distance is enough. You begin to see it. You begin to see anger. You see how it works. You see how the anger-related other emotions are. And that is also emotion-focused therapy. So you find it very interesting. You find it exciting. Oh, here is anger. Here is shame. Here is powerlessness. Then you are almost becoming a therapist like that. So that is what you should do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to regulate them. It's a way of coming to know, coming to understand, being mindful. The moment you see the thing, then the problem disappears. So mindfulness of emotions, as I have discussed here, then you know the difference between anger and patience, anger and resilience. Then you know that you have about 10% of resilience, but you know that your father has 20% of resilience. You can see, how these emotions vary in people, and it becomes exciting, it becomes interesting. And for me, looking at these emotions within myself, I find it like reading a book, you see. So this is an important question, but emotion regulation cannot be just tied to regulation as such. Okay.
Okay, the next question. The concept of karma may be taken by the patient to mean he or she is getting the suffering which he or she deserves. How can you handle this in giving therapy in a Buddhist context?
In fact, before I get to this question, on mindful emotions, emotions have a great impact on our life, and we need to develop mindfulness of emotions to the complicated relations with bad humor. Here, I have shown how humor can be used to, there's a television drama which came Status Anxiety. So this television drama helps you to identify your own anxieties, your own envy of others, your concern with status anxiety and so on. That is using humor. But what I am trying to say is this is not humor but mindfulness. So mindful emotions. Now to come to this one. The concept of karma may be taken by the patient to mean he or she is getting what she deserves. Suffering. How can you handle this in giving therapy in the Buddhist context? Well, the answer is simple, you see. Karma is not determination. The Buddha did not say, in fact, the whole idea of karma simply means the results of your actions, Now, don't think of some karma coming from this birth and that birth and all that sort of thing. I mean, those things are there. But the most workable, therapeutic thing is karma is the result of actions. So if you convert karma into determination, karma is really self-determination, not determination. So once you have the motive and the incentive, you can deal with it, but of course sometimes when therapists might find that some people are really hard knocks, very difficult to handle, then of course one might think that then you might relate the story of Angulimala from the Buddha. You have heard of Angulimala, the robber thief who collected 99 fingers and was searching for the 100th one. And he was going after the footsteps of the Buddha. It's a story anyway. And then we found that however much far you walk, the distance between him and the Buddha is the same. So this man turned out and said, "Hey man, you are running." The Buddha said, "It's quite a long time that I stopped running in samsara," right? This completely changed this man. This might be partly a story, but the moral is that, you see, you can change people. You can change people. So self-determination, change, transformation, they are potential. The Angulimala story is a paradigm. It's a paradigm example. Now see, lots of the very famous prison reform, lots of work done. In fact, I have written in that book on conflicts, how in dialectical behavior therapy, how Tolstoy's Crime and Punishment, how a man who killed a money lender, but he didn't like the profession, later developed tremendous amount of compassion. And he moves from compassion to revenge to compassion. And the dialectical behavior is found that this can be changed. That's a very famous book, the Buddha, by one of the patients. I forget the exact title of that. So the thing is this, karma should not be converted into a kind of determination. Like the Angulimal story, which showed the tremendous possibility of transformation, change. Lots of people have changed, work in the prisons, if you really see the work that is done in the prisons and so on. Prison reform is now a major theme in America and so on. So you can change people, but it's a fact that there may be some people who come life to life. They are really, they're getting onto the wrong track. It's possible. Yes, that's...
Okay. In your experience, did you find sadness and depression being not amenable to counseling? How often and why?
In your experience, did you find sadness and depression being not amenable to counseling? How often and why? The question is, now he's asking me, right? From person to person. Now really when this depression at a certain point, it's very blurred. It's very blurred that you sort of, but then there is at some point, the person whom we have lost can inspire you that coming back to normality is the best that I can do for this person. Now that's what I felt, you see. That's what I felt. I felt depressed. Of course, there were lots of other factors for depression which I can't say now, and that sort of thing. How I got fed up with Monash, and it's a long story, you see. But that feeling that if you change, you can do something on behalf of the... So it completely gets converted into a strong emotional inspiration drive. But earlier there are blockages, and partly I think the brain is very important. When the brain becomes lazy, then it becomes depressive, then it's very difficult to change. So you should have the correct type of therapist to really... In my case, I had a very good psychiatrist, a Sri Lankan, who knew me very well, And he helped me a lot. So you need to come out of depression. But anyway, it wasn't such a big blockage, but it ultimately brings a spring of inspiration. Okay? Finished?
I have more questions, but
I don't bother you. You want to be?
You want to have the music?
If I want to, shall I finish up with my song or something?
Okay. So we may not have time for to finish all the questions, but we want to reserve some time to invite Professor to have the music therapy for us. So I would like to invite Professor to conduct the music therapy now.
Yes, I thought how tiring day. I have used a little bit of music therapy from time to time, It has helped me. One is a very strong devotional song known to a lot of Sri Lankans, going back to the city of Anuradhapura. Anuradhapura, it describes. I will start with that. Dhanno Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda Devira Kirti Sundar Sile Nibanda Dhamma Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda Devira Kirti Sundar Sile Nibanda Klesha Nasna Bhiksha Atteya Bose Ratundna Prajna Prakase Dhanno Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda Pevira Kirti Sanda Sile Nibanda Tumatame Devlavase Inname Peramuni Darshanavase Erdi and Janau, the arhats flying over the sky. Erdi and Janau, Nikarahatun, Sevanale Hiru Rashmiya Banga, Manal Neluma, Pushpajati, Tepakunola, Bohojalapadi. Dhanno Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda Pevira Kirti Sundar Sile Nibanda Dhanno Budunge Sri Dharmaskanda Pevira Kirti Sundar Sile Nibanda. This has been my food-like thing, at night. The other one is a melody, little song which I composed with the Sri Lankan. The music group liked it very much. It's about the morning blossoms of the samang, the flower. Arunodayame udavela samam pichamal Sundama Arunodayam Udavela Samam Pichamal Sundama Sumudu Siriya Sunimal Pokurupitim Pipila Kumudu Sina Kumudu Sina Kumudu Sina Tiyauven Vagirila Kandugati Syria Miri Suniri Gita Gaya Kurulurana Vengvigya. After beautiful singing, the birds are going on migration. Miri Suniri Gita Gaya Kurulurana Vengvigya. Arunodayame udavela samam pichamal suvandama sumudu siriya sunimal pokurupitim pipita kumudu sina kumudu sina kumudu sina kumudu sina kumudu sina. But I just gave there are a lot of things that I sing from time to time. There used to be a Hawaiian song also which I used to sing, but this is rather very late in the evening. And yes, thank you very much.
I think it's really wonderful to end the lecture today with these few wonderful songs. So could we have another big round of applause to Professor De Silva? Thank you so much for your inspiring lecture and the wonderful songs that you just shared with us. Professor Da Silva will offer one more public lecture in the evening on coming Tuesday with the theme Exploring the Nature of Emotions, the Somatic Perspective in Darwin and James, and the Ideogenic Perspective in Freud. So please do miss it, and we hope to see you again in the next lecture. Thank you, and have a nice evening.